Hey guys, and welcome to today's watercolor tutorial. Today I'm going to paint this hand here with watercolors in a realistic way. And I show you how I mix skin tones with watercolors, because hands are really not the easiest thing that you could choose for painting. And I actually drew this hand instead of transferring the reference photo directly to my watercolor paper. So this is a drawing that I created, then I copied it to another paper, and then I used pastels on the one side and just traced it through. With this way I could make sure that my hand is placed correctly on my watercolor paper, and that I also don't damage the watercolor paper with erasing all the time, because this is the way how I draw. I always have to erase a lot because I never get all the just shapes and proportions right the first time. I have to really correct a lot. So I'm starting off with mixing a base skin tone. For that I'm using my large squirrel brush here. I really like this brush because I can fill large areas, or I can also fill in smaller areas, and this is a great brush to fill in the base colors of your drawing. I'm just thinking what could be a good base for the hand, and I'm using ochre and burnt sienna for this one. And there's also a lot of yellow in the skin, but I think I'm going with this brownish tone here. I think that looks okay. And I just give everything here this base tone. Of course, I try to stay in the lines. I don't want to go over them. It might be already a bit too dark, so I'm adding just a bit of water into the paint here, and I'm filling in the rest, just coloring the whole area here. So the complete area here is now wet. What I'm going to do is that I will hold the drawing like that, or the painting like that, and I'm just adding a nice just watercolor dripping effect here, because I want to have a nice ending of the painting. It just shouldn't just end with anything. So I think that's okay. It's nothing special, but it's okay. Now where everything is wet, I can add some nice gradients into this area here, into the skin area. And I actually forgot the nail, so I'm adding the nail here. There's a lot of bluish tones in the hand. In this area are a lot of greenish tones. Yeah, it's more green like blue actually, and here as well. So what I do now is that I mix turquoise tone, and I'm also using a bit of olive green. There's a lot of green in skin. If you didn't know, there is. Especially when you take your own photographs and they are not manipulated in Photoshop or professionally manipulated, you will probably notice that the skin has really, really many colors in it. So I'm adding this green tone here, just carefully. So I'm just realizing that I'm using Hanemühle. I don't know if it's cold pressed or hot pressed. It doesn't say it. But normally I would expect the paint here to dissolve because it's all wet, but apparently this paper doesn't do that. But that's no problem. I think it's an easy paper to work on because I can pretty much paint on this wet area without everything directly spreading on the entire area. So I will just continue adding these green tones here, just around this area. And my photograph is actually a bit dark, so I'm trying to not make it that dark because I think that's not, it wouldn't look that great. It doesn't look pretty. The darker you get with watercolors, the less light they look and the less fresh they look. So I try to avoid that, but I oftentimes overwork my artwork, so I have to be a bit careful here. I will now add some rose to the fingertips, and I am using magenta here. Magenta and burnt sienna, because the rose is not super pinkish, it's more like a bit muted. And I am using very wet color here. Especially in the beginning stages, it is good to work all the gradients and to build the gradients up. Once you have added too much color, it's difficult to get it off the paper. So I am starting here very carefully. This fingertip as well here. So the red area only covers the bottom part of the middle finger. So I don't try to add too much of the rose tone. Here is actually a shadow area, and then the ring finger is a bit darker at the tip, so there's a shadow area. And this shadow area is orange and brown. So I'm using cadmium red light and burnt sienna, and I mix this darker shadow tone there. So this paper actually let the color dry very quickly, which is nice. So I might not need the hair dryer. We will see. For the color pencils part, the paper has to be completely dried, otherwise the color pencils will rip off the surface of the paper and then the artwork is done. Okay, the little finger here has also a shadow at the bottom, which is brownish pinkish again, like that. So this paper actually sucks in a lot of the paint, which isn't a bad thing. I will probably just have to add more paint than I intended. Okay, this got a bit too wet, so I'm adding a shadow here. And there are always shadows around the knuckles. And I'm using a wet brown tone for this. Now the brown tone is a bit more, a bit less saturated, so I'm using Van Dyke Brown here and adding this to my sienna tone. This might be a bit too strong. And this is just the shadow on the right side of the hand. I always have a wet brush so that I can smooth out the edges of the paint. Otherwise I get some borders. Sometimes it's nice, I want to have borders, but in the hand I don't want to. So this area here needs to be darker. I'm using burnt sienna and olive green to mix a shadow tone. And I just touch the surface and the paint gets sucked into the paper and it dissolves. So this is one of the wet and wet technique that I apply oftentimes. And now I'm using a wet brush to blend it into the rest of the skin. We need a shadow here too, and I'm using this olive green again and a bit of sienna again. I think olive green and sienna and ochre are the main skin tones that I use for mixing for skin, for face and for hands. They are a very natural combination. So I'm just adding a bit of ochre here to make it more yellowish, like the reference photo, like that. And it makes a really nice gradient here. So this is when you paint wet and wet, it gets a nice gradient. The paper buckles a bit, but this is, many people complain that the paper buckles, and what I do about that, I don't do anything. I just don't mind. When the painting is finished, I can just press it between wooden sheets and then it's flat again. So I don't mind personally. So here the area, the muscle here that you have, it's a bit orange, so I'm adding this orange here. And here as well, in this area, there's a lot of orange and a bit of red as well. So I'm adding these colors there. And the red tones that I use are cadmium red. You can't do anything wrong with cadmium tones, they are all very good quality. I think they're also the most expensive tones, or some of the expensive tones, but they last long and they have bright colors. So I use them both for my oil paints, like the actual pigments are, so I buy cadmium tones for my oils and my watercolor paintings. It's not like that I use the same paints. So here's the orange area, and I'm just filling this in here. The fingertips gotten a bit light, so I'm just adding another layer of orange here. And there's a little bit of thumb visible behind the index finger. I don't want to forget that. And now I want to outline the contours of the fingers in the right part of the hand. And for that I need a smaller brush. So let me get one. What's with this one? It's not that small. Here's a small brush. This is a great size. I think I start with brownish orange contours. If I make a contour wrong, it doesn't matter. I can just go with a darker color over it. I need to zoom in into my picture here on the laptop, like that. Okay, I can't see my reference, my underdrawing anymore, so I have to carefully compare it with the reference picture and see if I draw the lines right here. one finger. Here's the other one. Hands look really weird. Drawing them is difficult, but what helps is to just compare every single proportion, every single finger with the other fingers, and especially the hand, this part of the hand. Many artists, me included when I was younger, would draw it way too short. So many artists get maybe the fingers right, but then the lower part of the hand is way too short or too thin, and it looks super wrong. So pay attention to the hand as well, not only to the fingers. So now I want to make the contour of the middle finger. Like that. And it really depends on what paper you use when you mix the colors. So now this paper tends to suck in a lot of the paint, and it's very light. I already added so many details, like this is already too light. And it really depends. For example, my Hanemüde Britannia paper, or also my Fabriano paper, Fabriano Artistico. There you don't need so much paint. I choose this one because it had the right size, and I thought, well, I should be able to paint on that paper too. So I just chose it. And I think it's not the greatest paper though. I think Britannia is better, and Fabriano as well. But I'm confident that this will become a good hand here. What I do now is that I see where the shadows here at the fingers, and they are on the right side. And there's also a bit green, so I used a bit of the olive green here. And just follow the shadow on the individual fingers. So this paper actually reactivates the underlying paint relatively strongly. The advantage of this is that you can make good blendings, so you don't have a lot of hard edges and you can correct a lot. The downside is that things you already painted get damaged. So like the contours are already gone, which is not so great. Okay, now we have a shadow here. And on the little finger there is a shadow as well, and it goes around the knuckle. And then it goes down here along the hand. And it goes over the complete back of the hand. And I'm now mixing a bit of blue into the hand here, because the back of the hand has a rather grayish tone, and I find it looks more natural when you use blues or greens instead of grays when you paint skin tones. This is why I choose this blue here. Now we need to make a blending, and this area is a bit orange, so I'm using cadmium yellow orange or cadmium light orange. This is a very bright color, so it's very strong. So I'm using a lot of water to dilute it here and to mix it into the blue tone. And then I'm just using my wet brush and blend it into the rest of the skin, like that. It will anyways probably fade a lot. The paper really sucked in so much of the paint. So, and now I want to contour this part here. There's a shadow here from the flower stem that goes over the inside of the hand. And I will use Van Dyke brown, a bit of that, ochre, and a bit of olive green. This should, and a bit of sienna. So this should give a good shadow tone here. I just follow here the contours of the hand, and the shadow goes until here. And there is a bit of red and sienna also there. It's not completely brown, so I'm just adding some of this red and sienna tone. Okay, I think this is okay. And I blend it a bit out because it's rather strong. Like that. Okay, and now the whole fingertip area needs to be more saturated. The color really didn't last, it kind of faded a lot. So I'm using orange. This is cadmium orange and a bit red, cadmium red. And I'm contouring the shape of the little finger, and I'm using a bit more of the orange tone. The more of those different tones you use, like when I paint, I add new colors all the way. Like you probably already realized that I add a lot of orange tones, and then a bit more yellow, and then a bit more red. And the more you use that, the more natural your skin tone will look, because you added all these different colors here. So here is a shadow, and I will use sienna, burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown to make a contour like that. Maybe with a smaller brush. Here's actually shadow as well, so I just connect this contour with the shadow of the index, no, of the middle finger, and I add a bit of orange here and red, because when you have fingertips, they are often red or pink because there's more blood in the fingertips than in the rest of the hand. Like the nose tips are also often red. And there are just parts of the body that are just different, have different colors. And not every part has the same skin tone. This is just not the reality. So I'm adding a contour here to the little finger, and I'm using blue because the contour is like purplish gray, or it's just gray. It's probably gray, but I use this green tone here, this blue-green tone. This looks correct to me, and I use the same for this contour here. And then the index finger is orange. as an orange contour. Okay, what I'm going to do now is that I will complete I will finish all the shadows and fill in all the shadows that I needed, and then I will do the color pencil parts. So you will see the watercolor process in time-lapse, and then the coloring process with watercolors will be in real time again, because it's just the same process and it might be a bit boring for you.